Hey guys, and welcome to another Sonically Sound video. Today we're going to look at how to mix drums. If you've looked at all my previous videos, we looked at the individual part of a drum set, how to EQ each one. We're going to now look at how to mix them all together so it sounds like a really nice, clear drum set. In this video, I'll be using Logic Pro 10 version 10.4.4. So if something doesn't look right to you at your setup at home, you might need to update. So when I'm mixing in Logic, I like to use the mixer that's set up here. This is so that I can look at all the faders and I can push them up and down as I please. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is start with the kick, get that at a good level, and then bring in the snare, hat, and so on. So let's start with that. Let's start with the kick drums, which we've already mixed together the two mics. So I want that to be my kind of bass level, so maybe bring it a bit louder. Because we're mixing the whole drum set, I might want a longer loop so I can get more of a dynamic range. So I think the bit I've got here is pretty good. That's quite a few bars there. I'm just muting all of these so that I can unmute them and bring them in. So now that the snare's in, I want that to really come through. And you'll hear that there's a lot of cymbal or hi-hat in that, but that's fine because we'll bring that in a sec. I'm going to make the loop a bit longer so that we can see the big chorus kind of come in for the drums, because that's when it's playing the most. So that's sounding quite good. Don't be too disheartened if you're not getting a real snap from the snare, because remember that will come in as well when we do the overheads. So the snare mixing bit isn't over yet. So now we want to bring in the hat. So that sounds quite good with the hat. It's low in the mix. We don't need it to be too loud, and we'll get more of it from cymbals, and we've got some of it in the drums and stuff. So it's coming through, just needs to be heard basically. And next we'll move to the toms. So I'll do the rack tom and then I'll put in the floor tom. So that gate is cutting quite quickly, so I might want to release it a bit longer. Remember as well that the reverb will create its own tail, and so that will sound quite smooth as well. Okay, so let's add the floor toms. overhead, so that's sounding quite good with the toms. I might boost the toms up a little bit more so they're heard a bit clearer. So that sounds quite good. And then the final touch is just adding the cymbals. So we've got the low end with the kick and the floor toms. And then we've got the kind of mid-range with the snare and the rack tom. Then the hi-hats is that high range, and we just want to bring in a bit more of the high range, and then we've got a whole range of frequencies that we're mixing with. And also we'll get some more of that snare sound that you might be after. And now that it's all introduced, I'm just starting to push some stuff up, push some stuff down, and just be like, I want to kind of hear this, I want to hear that. So I want to hear a bit more of the snare, so maybe I'll push up the snare tracks, or maybe a bit of the overhead. So that's sounding quite nice, but I might want to adjust some of the reverbs, because you'll notice that some of them aren't maybe being as well heard. So maybe we want to boost up the snare or something like that. I'm going to give the toms a lot of reverb so that when they come in, it's really powerful. And I think I'm going to create a large space sound, and I think that's what I'm going to go for. So that's starting to sound really nice for me. This is a rock song, so if you're feeling like this is very intense and everything's playing and it's very loud, then that is very much to the genre. Maybe if you're doing a contemporary song, like a pop song, maybe everything's a bit less intense and so you can hear everything a lot clearer. Or if it's jazz, obviously, it's a lot slower and less compressed. But for a rock song, this sounds quite good. Now, one of the final things I tend to do when it comes to mixing drums is something called parallel compression. Basically what this does is I send all of the drums to this one auxiliary, like we did with the reverb. I send it to this auxiliary, and the only plugin I have on it is compression. And the compression is very harsh, more harsh than I'd maybe want it to be. And basically the reason I do that is I mix that level, I mix that auxiliary, the parallel compression, with the mix of the drums I have here. So what I'll do is I will go to send, plus send, and send to. So now this is going to a second bus. We'll label it para for parallel compression. So I'll add a compressor to it, Studio FET. First though, I want to make sure every drum track is into this parallel compression track. So we're going to put everything in except for the room mics. Once they're in, you want to hold down Alt and click on the dial, because you want the entire signal, you want the whole amount of the signal coming in. You don't want a little bit or whatever, you want the zero, whole amount. So Alt on each of these. So then if we scroll over to the auxiliaries, you'll see that compression is very loud at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the compression and I'm going to slam it. So let's start with 9 and see how that kind of sounds. So you'll notice that it sounds very compressed. And this is the kind of thing I'd be saying to you, don't compress your drums to sound like that. And I still agree, you shouldn't compress your drums like that. But you'll also notice that that gives it a real snap and it's really hard, which is great, but it does mean that the output gain peaks a lot. So I just turn down the output gain here, which just controls that. So what I want to do is I don't want this to be entirely in it. I just want it to be kind of in it. So what we will now do, we'll hit play. And so we'll just hear the drum mix that I've made, and then I'll slowly bring in this parallel compression. And what will happen is we'll start to hear more of a punch. And basically the reason I mix it in is because it really carries a real power and punch, but we don't want the whole thing in. So let's see how it sounds. So you'll see there that it is, of course, much louder, but also it's just really kind of punching through. So if I play it without the parallel compression, and then with, it's really punchy and strong, and that's really helping the drums come through, and that will prove really helpful when you mix the other instruments in. So that's kind of how you would mix it. The one final thing I'd like to show is what you do once you've done this. So you've mixed all your drums, you've got a perfect mix. You don't want to, when you start mixing in other instruments, go, oh, I like that, but the drums need to come down, and select every single track and drag it down. So there are two things you can do. One thing is select all of these. So we're going to select all of these. We're going to leave the room on its own because it does have a lot of the guitar and stuff. So what you do is you select this, right click, and you go create stack track. Then it will say summing stack, and you hit create. Now what this has done is it has put all of the drums into this one track. If I were to label it drums and then hit this arrow here, all of the drum channels are living in just here. So now if I were to hit play, I'll mute these. I have a master control of all the drums in that stack track. So I'll bring that back to normal. Basically, this is useful for once you start mixing everything else in, because you'll then have bass and you'll then have keys and guitar, and you kind of, if you want to push just the drums down a little bit, you can just control it like that. The other thing to do is assign groups or VCAs. So what you can do is if I open up the drums and then select them all like I just did, create new VCA. And you'll see all of these now have the label VCA1. If you go to the end here, you'll see it says VCA1. And basically that's a similar thing where it is a master control, but you can't put effects on it. You can't put, it's literally just that. And so I will sometimes use that for mixing. That typically comes from mixing live, they have VCAs on that. But if you just want to do the drum stack and then mix it with those, then feel free to do that as well. I'm just showing you two separate techniques of how to mix. So there you go. That's how you mix drums. We'll probably look at mixing these other things. As you can see, there's stuff that says bass and electric and keys. And I'd really like to look at mixing those with you guys. So just let me know in the comments if you want to see more like this. Let me know if there's other things you want me to cover, if you want me to cover different styles or anything. But yeah, just let me know. So there you go. That's how you mix drums. I hope you liked this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. And if there's a video I haven't covered or you'd like me to, put it in the comments below and I'll see if I get to it. I'm Sonically Sound, and until next time, have fun mixing.